The twin suns of the Empire's capital world burned in the skies above the grand city of Kalora. Towers of shining crystal rose into the clouds, their surfaces reflecting light that painted the entire horizon in shades of gold and silver. This was the seat of power for the alien empire known as the Veyari, a people strong in both might and pride. At the very heart of this empire stood Queen Nira, the fierce ruler who commanded fleets that stretched across the stars. She was feared and respected by allies and enemies alike, but her heart was bound not only to her empire but also to her younger twin sister. Nira and Lyra were different in spirit, though they shared the same sharp features, glowing eyes and graceful forms that marked their royal bloodline. Nira was hardened by the weight of rule. She was a commander who knew the sound of battle, the taste of victory, and the cost of defeat. Her voice could shake a council hall, and her glare could silence even the proudest general. Lyra, however, was softer. She had a curious mind and an open heart. While her sister dealt with war councils and strategy, Lyra walked among the people, speaking to traders, healers, and scholars. She believed the strength of their empire came not only from force but also from understanding. On the day of the Grand Council, the two sisters entered the chamber side by side. The hall was vast, filled with banners of conquered worlds, a reminder of the Veyari's reach. Representatives from across the empire had gathered, waiting to hear the queen's words. The air was heavy with expectation, for Nira had promised an announcement that would shape the future of their people. But before the queen could speak, an unexpected silence fell. Lyra, who had been seated beside her, was gone. One moment she had been there, listening intently to the whispers of the council, and the next her place was empty. Nira rose to her feet instantly, her sharp gaze sweeping across the hall. "Where is she?" Her voice echoed like thunder, shaking the pillars of the chamber. Guards rushed forward, scanning every corner, every shadow, yet no trace of the young princess could be found. Panic spread like fire through the council. Whispers filled the air: assassination, kidnapping, betrayal. Nira's jaw tightened and her fists clenched at her sides. She was not only a queen but also a sister, and in that moment the ruler gave way to the protector. "Seal the city," she ordered. "No ship leaves, no ship lands. My sister will be found." The guards obeyed without hesitation. Across Kalora, search parties began to sweep through streets and towers. Drones scanned the skies. Interceptors blocked the spaceways. Yet the princess remained missing. Hours stretched into days, and still no sign of Lyra was uncovered. Nira's fury grew with every passing moment. She interrogated officials, questioned her generals, and demanded answers from her spies. Many believed that a rival faction within the empire might have taken her, hoping to weaken the queen's rule. Others whispered darker rumors that perhaps the humans, the strange newcomers who had begun to wander the edges of Veyari space, had stolen her. The mention of humans stirred something in Nira. She had heard of them before. They were not the most powerful species, nor the most advanced, yet their name carried a strange weight. Stories told of their stubborn survival, their refusal to bow, their unpredictable courage. They had defeated threats larger than themselves simply because they refused to surrender. To Nira, they were a curiosity, but now with her sister missing, they became a target for suspicion. In the quiet of her private chamber, Nira stood before the great star map. Worlds glimmered like jewels in the darkness. Her empire stretched far, yet even within her vast reach, she felt powerless. She remembered the days of her youth when she and Lyra had been inseparable. They trained together in the gardens of their palace, sparred with wooden blades, and watched the stars from the highest tower. Lyra was her mirror, her balance the only one who could soften her hardened heart. To lose her was not only a wound to her soul, but also a threat to the unity of the empire. One night, a messenger entered the chamber. His face was pale, his steps hesitant. "My queen," he said, bowing low, "we have found traces of an escape pod. It left the planet on the day of the council and vanished into deep space. Its course was hidden, but fragments of its trail remain." Nira's eyes narrowed. "Whose hands guided it?" "We cannot say, my queen. But the pod was not of Veyari design. It bore signs of alien construction. Some believe it may be linked to the humans." The queen's fury burned hotter than the sun's. She slammed her hand upon the table and the star map flickered. "If the humans have taken her, then they will know the wrath of the Veyari. Prepare the fleets. I will tear apart their worlds until she is returned." Across the Empire, the drums of war began to beat. Soldiers sharpened their blades, pilots checked their ships, and the people whispered in fear and awe. For when Queen Nera called her fleets, no star system was safe. Yet beneath her rage, a shadow of doubt lingered. Why would humans who had no history with the Veyari take her sister? What purpose would they have in risking the fury of an empire so much greater than themselves? But questions could wait. Answers would come only when Lyra was found. Far away, beyond the borders of the Empire, Lyra drifted in silence within the dark shell of an escape pod. Her eyes were closed, her breathing faint. The pod's systems were damaged, sparks flickering across broken panels. She was lost adrift between stars. Yet fate had not abandoned her, for a human ship would soon cross her path. Back on Calora, Queen Nera stood alone at the highest balcony of the palace, her gaze fixed upon the endless sky. Her sister's absence weighed upon her like a chain, dragging her thoughts into the depths of anger and grief. She whispered into the night, her words carried only by the wind. "Where are you, Lyra? Who has taken you from me?" And though the stars gave no answer, her heart burned with one truth. She would not rest, she would not stop until her sister was returned. The human vessel Aurora moved quietly through the deep stretches of space. It was not a warship nor a merchant ship, but a simple exploration craft, its silver hull marked with signs of long journeys across uncharted stars. The ship was small compared to the great fleets of the Veyari Empire, but its heart was strong. On board was Aaron, a human explorer who had chosen a life away from crowded colonies and political disputes. He preferred silence, discovery, and the thrill of finding something unknown. For weeks, Aaron had traveled near the edges of known maps, scanning new systems and recording planets that might hold resources or life. He lived a quiet routine, repairing his ship, checking his readings, and sending data back to human outposts. The galaxy was vast, and often he felt like a lone traveler drifting through an endless sea. Yet he never complained. This was the life he had chosen. One day, while monitoring his sensors, Aaron noticed a strange signal. It was faint, almost hidden, but it repeated with irregular pulses. He adjusted his scanners and leaned forward. "What is this?" he muttered to himself. The signal was not from a planet, nor from any natural source. It was mechanical, artificial, and most importantly, it was a distress call. Aaron quickly adjusted his ship's course. Hours later, he reached the origin of the signal and saw something small floating in the void. At first, it appeared like broken debris from a damaged craft. As his ship drew closer, he realized it was an escape pod. The pod was battered, its surface scarred with burns, and pieces of its frame had cracked under pressure. It looked as though it had traveled far without proper support. Aaron's heart quickened. Escape pods were built to protect lives, but many never lasted long in the emptiness of space. He activated his docking system and carefully pulled the pod into his hangar bay. As the doors sealed, the ship's atmosphere filled the chamber, and Aaron rushed forward to inspect. The pod's glass canopy was fogged, but inside, he could make out a figure. It was not human. The shape was slender, graceful, with markings and features he had never seen before. He pressed a button to unlock the pod, and the canopy slowly lifted. Lying inside was a young woman, her skin glowing faintly with an otherworldly hue. Her hair shimmered like strands of silver under the light, and her eyes, though closed in unconsciousness, spoke of a heritage not of Earth. She was dressed in clothing that was torn, but its patterns were elegant and clearly of a culture unknown to humans. Aaron knelt beside her, checking her breathing. To his relief, it was steady though faint. "Not human," Aaron whispered, "but alive." He gently lifted her out of the pod and carried her to the medical chamber of his ship. He placed her on the bed and scanned her with his equipment. The readings were unlike anything he had seen, but he could identify the basics. She was exhausted, dehydrated, and her body showed signs of strain, but there were no mortal wounds. She had survived something terrible, but she still lived. For hours, Aaron worked quietly. He gave her water, repaired her torn garments with emergency fabric, and adjusted the temperature of the room to match what he guessed might suit her biology. Though she remained unconscious, her breathing grew stronger, and her face looked calmer than before. When finally she stirred, Aaron sat at her side. Her eyes opened slowly, revealing a golden light that shimmered like stars. She blinked, confused, her gaze moving around the unfamiliar room until it fell on Aaron. She tried to rise, but weakness forced her back down. Her lips moved, speaking words in a language he could not understand. Aaron raised his hands gently. "It's all right. You're safe here. I found you in a pod. I'm not here to hurt you." Her golden eyes studied him carefully. Though she could not understand his words, she seemed to sense his calm. She lay back, her breathing slowing. Aaron fetched water and held it near her. She hesitated but accepted, sipping carefully. Days passed in the quiet rhythm of healing. Though they could not speak the same tongue, small gestures built a bridge between them. When Aaron brought her food, she accepted it with a nod. When she tried to stand and stumbled, he caught her gently. He noticed how her eyes often lingered on him, studying him with curiosity rather than fear. On the third day, she finally spoke a word that he recognized. Her voice was soft but steady. "Lyra." Aaron pointed to her, repeating the sound. "Lyra." She nodded slowly, a faint smile crossing her lips. He touched his chest. Aaron, her smile grew wider. For the first time, they understood each other, if only through names. Though Aaron did not know her story, he could sense the weight behind her presence. She was not an ordinary traveler. Her manner, her clothing, and the way she carried herself all hinted at importance. Yet she seemed more at peace here, far from whatever had chased her into the void. One evening, as the ship drifted near a quiet nebula, Aaron found Lyra standing at the viewing window. Her strength had returned enough for her to move freely. The glowing clouds of gas painted her figure in soft colors, and she reached out her hand as though trying to touch the stars. Aaron stood beside her silently, letting her enjoy the view. She glanced at him, then placed her hand gently on her chest. "Home," she whispered in her own tongue, her voice filled with longing. Aaron understood the meaning even without translation. She was far from where she belonged. He gave a small nod. "We'll find it," he said softly, though he doubted she understood. What he did not know was that across the galaxy, Queen Nira had already set her fleets into motion. To her, Lyra was not just missing but stolen, and humanity stood accused. The Veyari ships burned through hyperspace, seeking any trace of her sister. And soon their path would lead to the small human vessel where Lyra had found safety. For now, aboard the Aurora, there was peace. Lyra rested without fear, and Aaron, though he did not fully understand, felt a strange bond forming between them. She was not just an alien he had rescued. She was someone who carried a story greater than his own. And though the silence of space surrounded them, both sensed that this was only the beginning of something much larger than either could imagine. The days aboard the Aurora passed slowly, yet each one carried something new for both Aran and Lyra. At first, their lives were separated by silence, divided by the great wall of language. But with every gesture, every small attempt to understand each other, a bridge slowly formed. Aaron kept the ship steady along its path, far from any major colonies, so that Lyra would have time to recover in safety. He taught her basic human words by pointing to objects and naming them aloud. He would hold up a piece of fruit and say, "Food," then hand it to her. She would repeat the word with a soft accent, her golden eyes bright with determination. Sometimes she mispronounced, and Aaron corrected her with patience, smiling whenever she laughed at her own mistakes. In return, Lyra taught him words from her own language. She would touch the wall of the ship and say the Veyari word for it, then wait until Aaron repeated it back. Their voices filled the once quiet halls of the Aurora, turning silence into learning. Slowly, they built a small shared vocabulary, enough for greetings, questions, and simple answers. One evening, while the stars glimmered outside the wide viewing window, Aaron sat at the table repairing a broken scanner. Lyra approached quietly, carrying a small tray of food she had tried to prepare using the supplies on board. The portions were uneven and the seasoning was strange, but her effort warmed Aaron more than the meal itself. He tasted it carefully, then smiled. "Good." He gave a thumbs-up gesture, something she had learned already. Lyra beamed with pride, her face glowing with happiness. Moments like these brought them closer. Aaron began to see her not as a stranger, but as a companion. And Lyra, who had once been frightened and lost, started to feel a sense of safety in his presence. When she awoke in the mornings, she no longer feared being alone. When she walked the ship's narrow halls, she knew she had someone to guide her. But beyond the small ship, the galaxy was stirring. Queen Nera's fleets crossed the stars with growing speed, their warships searching every corner for signs of the missing princess. Entire systems trembled at the sight of the Veyari banners. To the Queen, nothing mattered more than finding Lyra, and every delay only sharpened her anger. Unaware of this looming storm, Aaron and Lyra continued to build their connection. One afternoon, while repairing one of the engines, Aaron handed Lyra a small tool. "Help," he said, pointing to a panel that needed to be held steady. Lyra crouched beside him, her movements graceful, and pressed the tool against the surface as instructed. Sparks jumped, and for a moment the engine hummed loudly. She flinched, but Aaron steadied her hand with his own, guiding her movements. Together they fixed the fault, and the ship's hum returned to normal. When it was done, Lyra laughed softly. "Together," she said in her broken human words. Aaron nodded with a smile. Together. That single word carried more meaning than the work they had completed. It became a symbol of the trust slowly forming between them. Later, they sat near the viewing window again. Lyra traced shapes in the air with her fingers, drawing patterns of stars. She spoke in her language, pointing to distant lights, and though Aaron could not understand every word, he guessed she was speaking of constellations and places she had once known. Her voice was gentle, filled with longing for her home, but there was also warmth when she looked at him. Aaron leaned back, thinking. He wondered who she truly was. Her clothing, her manners, and her presence spoke of someone important, perhaps even royal. Yet she had not tried to command him or act above him. She shared food, helped with repairs, and laughed at his jokes. To him, she was not a ruler or a noble figure. She was simply Lyra. That night, as Lyra rested, Aaron sat in the cockpit, reviewing his star charts. He had begun to notice unusual activity in nearby systems, patrols, signals, movements that suggested fleets were on the hunt. Though he did not know the cause, he sensed danger drawing closer. He glanced toward the medical chamber where Lyra slept and whispered to himself, "Who are you really, and why would fleets be moving for you?" The answer would come soon enough, but not from her lips. A week later, the Aurora drifted near a trading station. Aaron planned only a brief stop to gather supplies, but even that short visit brought whispers. In the crowded market, he overheard two merchants speaking. "They say the Veyari queen has sent her fleets," one said. "Her sister is missing," replied the other. "Some say humans took her." Aaron froze. His thoughts raced back to Lyra. The description fit too well. Could she truly be the sister of such a powerful queen? The idea seemed impossible. Yet, it explained everything: the escape pod, her refined clothing, her noble bearing, and the fleets now stirring across space. He returned quickly to the ship, his mind heavy with questions. When Lyra saw his troubled face, she tilted her head, concerned. Aaron did not speak, but he knew the truth was clear. She was not just any traveler. She was a royal, and her disappearance was shaking empires. That evening, Aaron confronted her gently. He pointed to the stars, then drew a crown shape with his hands. "You, queen, royal?" he asked slowly. Lyra's eyes widened, and for a moment she looked uncertain. Then she shook her head and touched her chest. "Not queen, sister. Queen Nera." She spoke the name with respect and a hint of sadness. Aaron leaned back, his thoughts confirmed. She was the twin sister of a ruler feared across the galaxy, and now she was here, in his small ship, trusting him. Though this truth brought weight, it did not change the bond between them. If anything, it deepened his resolve to protect her. She was far from home, hunted and fragile despite her strength. He would not let harm come to her, but protection would soon be tested. One night, alarms blared across the Aurora. Aaron rushed to the cockpit, Lyra close behind him. The scanners showed several unknown vessels entering the system. Their shapes were sharp, their energy signatures powerful. Aaron's blood ran cold. Veyari warships. Lyra's face paled as she recognized them. She whispered something in her language, then looked at Aaron with fear and urgency. They are looking for you, Aaron said quietly. She nodded, her golden eyes shining with worry. She placed her hand on his arm, as if begging him not to surrender her. Aaron stared at the approaching signals, then at her. Despite the risk, he knew his choice. "We'll run," he said firmly. The Aurora roared to life, engines pushing against the pull of the system. The smaller ship darted into hyperspace just as the warships closed in. In the silence that followed, Aaron glanced at Lyra. She still held his arm, her grip tight but her face filled with relief. He gave her a small smile. "Together?" he said again. She returned the smile, her fear easing. "Together," she whispered back. And though the fleets of her sister drew ever closer in that moment, aboard the small human vessel, trust had grown into something unshakable. It was no longer a bond of survival. It was the beginning of friendship, an unlikely bond that would soon challenge the wrath of an empire. The Aurora moved silently through the dark expanse of space, carrying both hope and danger within its small hull. Aaron had been navigating with care, trying to avoid major traffic lanes, but he knew the Veyari fleet was close. The signals of powerful warships had grown stronger over the past hours, and he could feel the tension vibrating through the ship. Lyra sat near the viewing window, her golden eyes fixed on the stars. The nebula outside glowed softly, painting her face in colors she had not seen since leaving her home. "Aaron," she whispered, her voice calm but filled with concern. "They will find us soon." He nodded without turning. "I know," he said. "We have to be ready." Moments later, a sudden flash appeared on the sensors. Several large vessels had exited hyperspace and were now directly in the ship's path. Their shapes were sharp and elegant, adorned with lights that marked them as Veyari warships. Lyra's hand flew to her mouth as recognition struck her. She had seen this design before. She had grown up with it, trained alongside the fleet, and now it was coming for her. "They have come for me," she said softly, almost as if she were speaking to herself. Aaron turned to her, his eyes steady. "We'll face them together," he said, offering a small but firm smile. "I won't let them hurt you." The ship's weapons glowed as they closed in, and soon a tractor beam locked onto the Aurora, pulling it slowly but firmly toward the largest vessel. Aaron worked frantically at the controls, trying every evasive maneuver he knew, but the Veyari technology was far superior. The ship shuddered as the beam drew them closer. Finally, the Aurora was pulled alongside the warship. Large docking clamps extended and locked the small vessel in place. Aaron held Lyra's hand as alarms blared. The doors opened with a hiss and the first glimpse of the Queen's forces appeared. Soldiers in sleek armor filled the entryway, moving with precision and silence. And at the center, Nira herself strode forward, her presence commanding and terrifying. Her golden eyes locked on her sister immediately. For a moment she did not speak. The air between them was filled with tension, a mixture of fury, relief, and confusion. Her fleet waited behind her, silent and alert, ready for orders. "Lyra," Nira said at last, her voice strong and controlled. "You are mine." Lyra stepped forward, shaking her head. "I am not yours to take by force," she replied, speaking carefully in a language Nira understood. "I am safe here, and this human has protected me." Nira's brow furrowed. She turned her gaze to Aaron. "You are the human who dared to interfere?" she asked, her tone sharp but not yet hostile. Aaron stood tall, meeting her gaze without fear. "I saved her life," he said simply. "I mean no harm. She is safe with me, and I will protect her." The Queen's eyes narrowed. She was used to obedience, to loyalty from every soldier and servant. Here in front of her stood a human who had not bowed, who had not feared her. And yet this human had her sister. A mixture of anger and curiosity filled Nira. "Why?" she demanded. "Why would you help her?" Aaron's voice was calm, carrying the certainty of truth. "Because she needed help. Because it was the right thing to do. That is enough reason." Nira stared at him, silence stretching in the air. She had expected fear, excuses, even lies. Instead, she saw honesty and bravery. It was not the answer she wanted, but it was the truth she could not ignore. Lyra took a step closer to Iran, placing a hand gently on his arm. "Nira," she said softly, "he saved me. I trust him. He means no harm." "You must see that." The Queen's expression softened slightly as she looked at her sister. Lyra's eyes were steady, filled with calm and assurance. Neera could see the bond they had formed, the trust that had grown in a matter of days. And yet the Queen's pride and responsibility weighed heavily on her. She had a duty to protect her people, to maintain order, and to bring her sister home. Aaron continued to hold Lyra's gaze. "You don't need to fight me," he said. "We can talk. We can find a way that keeps everyone safe." Neera's hand rested on the hilt of her blade, a gesture of both authority and readiness. Her fleet waited for her signal, ready to act at a moment's notice. She felt the weight of every decision pressing down on her shoulders. To strike would be to endanger her sister. To trust would be to challenge her own command. For long minutes no one spoke. Then slowly Neera lowered her hand. She stepped closer, her gaze fixed on Lyra. "If you choose to stay with this human, then you are leaving my protection," she said, her voice low but firm. "But know this, sister. I will not allow harm to come to you. I will watch and I will judge." Lyra nodded, understanding her sister's meaning. She stepped forward and embraced Neera briefly, a quiet gesture that spoke of love, respect, and a shared history. "I am safe," she whispered. "Trust me." Neera's eyes glistened with unshed emotion. She did not lower her pride entirely, but she understood that Lyra's choice was made. Turning her gaze back to Aaron, she studied him carefully. "You are not of my world," she said finally. "Yet you have my sister's trust. Do not fail her." "I will not," Aaron replied simply, his voice steady. With that, Neera signaled her fleet. The warships did not attack, but they did not leave either. They formed a protective barrier around the Aurora, a silent reminder that she could command both protection and power. In the quiet that followed, Lyra and Aaron remained side by side, their hands brushing lightly as they looked toward the stars. They were still far from home, still surrounded by danger, but for the first time, they felt the weight of trust shared between three beings from entirely different worlds. Neera remained a few steps away, her eyes on her sister. She knew that the human had earned Lyra's respect and protection, and though it irritated her pride, she could not deny that he had done what she could not. She had been searching, commanding fleets, and yet this human had reached her sister first, saving her from unknown threats. Aaron looked at Neera and bowed slightly, a gesture of respect. "We will do everything to keep her safe," he said. The Queen studied him for a long moment before nodding. "Then let this be a test of trust," she said quietly. "We will see if your loyalty matches your words." For Lyra, the confrontation was a relief as much as it was frightening. She knew her sister's temper, her pride, and her strength. To face Neera without fear had been impossible before, but now, standing beside Aaron, she felt courage she had never felt before. Together, the three of them left the docking bay, the Queen walking with the silent confidence of authority, Lyra walking with the trust she had placed in both her sister and Aaron walking with the quiet strength that had earned him their respect. The stars outside stretched infinitely, a reminder of the dangers and possibilities that lay ahead. Battles might come, fleets might challenge them, and choices would need to be made. But for now, in this fragile moment, trust had grown, bonds had formed between worlds. And in the silent strength of these connections, a new hope began to shine. The Queen would remain watchful, but she had learned something important. Strength was not always in dominance. Sometimes it was in protection, sometimes it was in trust, and sometimes it was in the quiet courage of a human willing to save a life far greater than his own. As the Aurora prepared to leave the docking bay, Aaron and Lyra exchanged a glance, knowing that the path ahead would be filled with challenges. Yet for the first time they were not alone. They had each other, and for Lyra that was more than enough. Neera returned to her ship, silently observing from the shadows, but within her chest, a small part of her heart softened. Her sister had chosen her own path, and, though it was different from the one she had imagined, it was filled with courage, trust, and hope, and in the silence of space, that hope would become their shield against the storms yet to come. The Aurora glided quietly through the stars, its small engines leaving a faint trail of light against the darkness of space. Aaron and Lyra stood together at the viewing window, watching nebulae and distant systems pass by. Though the galaxy stretched infinitely before them, they were not alone. Queen Neera's fleet remained nearby, a silent and constant reminder of the world they had left behind and the power that still watched them. Lyra's golden eyes reflected the colors of the stars. She had grown stronger in the days aboard the Aurora. She had learned patience, trust, and even a measure of courage she had never needed in her royal life. Aaron had been her guide, her protector, and in many ways her friend. The bond between them was quiet but unbreakable. "Aaron," she said softly, "do you think she will ever forgive me for leaving?" Aaron shook his head gently. "She may not forgive immediately, but she will understand. Queen Nira is strong, but she also loves you. That love will guide her." Lyra nodded, comforted by his words. She knew her sister's pride was immense, but she also knew that Nira's heart, hidden beneath the armor of authority, would see the truth. Aaron's presence had given her hope, and hope, she realized, was stronger than fear. Meanwhile, aboard the largest Veyari warship, Nira stood before the fleet's command table. The stars reflected in her eyes, and her expression was unreadable. Her forces had surrounded the Aurora, ready for battle, yet she had given the signal not to attack. She had seen the bond between her sister and the human. She had seen trust, courage, and protection that even her fleets could not provide. Her advisors looked uneasy, waiting for instructions. "My queen," one said cautiously, "are we to remain idle while the human carries your sister?" Nira's gaze remained fixed on the stars. "Trust is sometimes stronger than force," she said quietly. "If harm comes to my sister, I will act. But until then, we watch, we learn, and we protect in our own way." Her words shocked the council. To the Veyari, strength was measured in fleets, weapons, and obedience. Yet the queen had chosen a different path, one that valued life, trust, and understanding. Back on the Aurora, Aaron guided the ship toward a distant system where resources and safety could be found. Lyra remained at his side, sometimes helping with navigation, sometimes simply watching the stars. Their conversations had grown more natural. She asked questions about humans, their worlds, and their lives. Aaron asked her about the Veyari, their customs, and her memories of home. Each story they shared built a bridge across the vast distance between their worlds. One day, as they passed a small planet with green oceans and bright skies, Lyra stopped to watch its surface. "Home," she whispered in her language, pointing toward the planet. Aaron followed her gaze and smiled. "Not your home," he said gently, "but maybe a place to rest." Lyra nodded, understanding his meaning. She leaned slightly on him, a quiet gesture of trust that spoke louder than any words. For Iran, it was a simple moment, but it carried the weight of everything they had endured together. While they rested, Nira continued her watch from afar. She saw the human treating her sister with respect and kindness. She saw Lyra learning, laughing, and even showing strength she had not expected. Slowly, Nira realized that her sister had chosen wisely. The human was not a threat nor a rival. He was a protector, a friend, and perhaps even something more. As the days passed, Nira decided to initiate communication. Using a long-range transmitter, she sent a message to the Aurora. The signal was strong but calm, her voice carrying authority yet filled with care. "Lyra," she said, "I am watching. I see your choice. I see your trust. Know that I respect it. Stay safe and remember, the Empire is not far." Lyra's eyes welled with tears at hearing her sister's words. She turned to Aaron and smiled. "She forgives me," she said softly. Aaron nodded, feeling relief and pride. "She does more than forgive," he said. "She understands." This understanding changed everything. What had begun as a potential conflict between species and empires slowly became a lesson in trust. The humans and Veyari could coexist, not through dominance or fear, but through respect and the courage to protect one another. Over time, the Aurora became a symbol of hope. Word of the human who had saved a Veyari princess spread quietly across systems. Some laughed, some doubted, but many watched with curiosity. The story showed that even in a galaxy ruled by empires and power, there was room for bravery, compassion, and understanding. Lyra continued to grow. She trained with Aaron in the small ways he could teach, learning not only survival skills but also how to navigate human technology and customs. She shared stories of the Veyari culture, their wisdom and their values. Aaron listened eagerly, fascinated by a world so different yet so full of life and purpose. One quiet evening, they stood together watching a cluster of bright stars. Lyra turned to Aaron, her voice soft. "I will return home one day," she said. Aaron smiled. "And I will help you," he replied. Lyra's golden eyes sparkled. I will tell Nira of everything you have done, she said. She must know. You have saved me and you have given me courage. Aaron shook his head humbly. I only did what anyone would do, he said. But he knew it was more than that. It took courage to face the unknown, to risk his life for someone from a distant world. And it took trust to see that life through compassion rather than fear. Finally, the day came when Nira's fleets withdrew slightly, allowing the Aurora more freedom of movement. Nira had watched long enough to see that her sister was safe, and that the human had earned respect. Though her pride remained, she understood that strength was not only in commanding fleets but also in protecting those you loved. Aaron and Lyra approached a system near the edge of explored space, a planet with peaceful skies, clear oceans, and a gentle climate. It was not Lyra's home, but it was safe, and it offered a place to rest, plan, and prepare for the journey back. As they descended toward the planet's surface, Lyra looked at Aaron. Thank you, she said simply. For everything, Aaron smiled. You would do the same for anyone, he said. She shook her head, a quiet laugh escaping her. Not everyone, she said. But you showed me trust, and trust is stronger than fear. The ship landed gently. Lyra stepped out first, feeling the solid ground beneath her feet for the first time in weeks. She looked at the horizon, the winds of this new world brushing against her face, and she felt freedom and peace. Aaron followed, placing a steady hand on her shoulder. Together they walked forward side by side, ready to face whatever the future might hold. Above them, the stars stretched endlessly. Somewhere beyond, Nira watched from the fleet, her golden eyes reflecting both pride and love. Her sister had chosen a path of courage and trust, and though the Empire remained vast and powerful, she understood something deeper. True strength was not only in fleets, weapons, or authority. It was in courage, compassion, and the bonds formed across worlds. The human and the alien, standing together on a distant world, became a symbol of hope for both species. They had faced fear, danger, and uncertainty, yet they had come through stronger. Their journey had shown that even in the galaxy's darkest corners, trust could shine brighter than any star. Lyra turned once more to Aaron. We will return home someday, she said. Yes, he replied. And when we do, we will bring everything we have learned together. And as the twin suns of this new world rose on the horizon, their light touched both human and Veyari alike. Bonds had been formed, trust had been earned, and a new understanding had begun, a reminder that across the vast expanse of stars, courage, hope, and compassion could unite even the most distant of worlds. The galaxy was wide, the future uncertain, but for now Lyra, Aaron, and even Queen Nira had discovered something priceless. Strength that came from trust, protection, and the unbreakable bond of those who choose to care for each other. And that bond, forged in fear and danger, would guide them into the days ahead, stronger than any fleet, wiser than any empire, and brighter than any star.